Hello, all. Welcome to this chat today on internal migrants. Talking about internal migration whips up a lot of passion. There is, on one hand, the perspective that there should be empathy on this issue that concerns inclusivity and of looking at migrants as people who have a lot to contribute in every which way to the destination cities that they migrate to. On the other hand, there is a contrasting view where people are divided over the question of migrants. They talk about being insiders and outsiders, of belonging or not belonging to a city. But then, if you look at uh, the whole question of migrants, there are issues both in the source cities as well as in the destination cities. But in the destination cities, just think of what services and goods are provided by the migrants. Take away their work and see, will cities will possibly be collapsing. An extremely interesting and significant topic. We have with us today two experts, Anuradha Nagaraj and Shivani Datta. They're going to tell us more about this very hot topic that just about everyone relates to. So now we'll get started with Anuradha. Hi Anuradha, welcome, and tell us about the work that you're doing in migration.
Great. Thank you so much. I've been a journalist for a really long time, like nearly 3 decades. And over the last decade, I was increasingly writing about labor rights, climate, the intersection of labor rights, climate, and energy transition. And throughout that journey, one of the things that was a common factor was the fact that there were a lot of migrant workers that I was coming across on the field. There were a lot of them I was interviewing. And so, about last year, a colleague of mine and I, we started what is called the migrationstory.com. It is a digital media platform. We call it a migration newsroom. And it's completely dedicated to telling stories of migration within India's borders primarily, and also of Indians going abroad under distress or duress. So, a lot of our work is about amplifying these voices, telling their stories, telling the good stories, the bad stories, the happy stories, and the sad stories, but with the focus very firmly on their journey, what it means to be an internal migrant in India, what are the challenges, and how they adapt and navigate through cities that they go to.
All right, thank you so much. Shivani, just like Anuradha just mentioned now about internal migrants, which is what we'd like to focus on. What do you think is, are the challenges that face internal migrants, especially regarding the formal status?
Yeah, definitely. When you talk about migrants, first of all, we need to understand that they are all citizens of India. They move from one state to the other. Maybe because there are many factors which pull them to a particular state. So there could be because of having a good living condition, or to have a good livelihood, or many other factors that even a marriage can also bring a person to another state. So what is important for us is to understand that there sometimes, when the rights do not reach to the migrants, or if there is a continuous flow of migrants to a state, there is a conflict with the host state. So because of many factors such as insecurity about the language, culture, and many other factors. So what is important to us is that whatever the legal framework is, that should reach to the migrants, and migrants should also be aware about their rights. If you go back to 2020, people became more concerned when they saw some pictures in the news, and when people were moving in bus or by on foot from one state to the other. I think then we realized that what a problem migrants may suffer, but otherwise they have been suffering from quite a long time. And that is what I think ma'am is also reporting with respect to many challenges which a migrant may face.
I think it was this picture, really, the iconic picture of the migrants, trudging their way on foot from their places of wherever they were earning their livelihoods back to their homes. That really caught the public imagination, and since then, more and more people have become aware of migrants and migration. And while the Indian constitution itself, and also just like what Shivani was saying, that they do have, that people have the right to move anywhere throughout the territory of India, what happens on ground is very different and can get quite ugly too. So I'd like to ask, just taking off on what Shivani has been speaking on about their rights to move and live wherever they wish, to Anuradha to say, like, you know, how exactly it is for migrants when it comes to living. What about identities or this whole us versus they, or like, you know, as they put it, othering them? How does that work out? Can you tell us, Anuradha?
Yeah, thank you. That's an interesting question. So, on a day to day basis, migrants are pretty indispensable, particularly in cities. So, largely, if you're looking at rural to urban migration, in cities in India cannot run if there is no migrant population at all. And by this, I mean, they are everywhere around us, you know, house help to people who are segregating our waste to delivery drivers. So they are pretty much everywhere, right? So in that sense, everyone already has a relationship with one or more migrants by default, you know. So I think on a day-to-day basis, actually, they are very indispensable. But I think what has happened over a period of time is that cities that they're migrating to, particularly from rural to urban, in urban cities, the city is not the way it is built and the way the lines, where they live, they've been pushed to the periphery. And therefore, small things kind of tend to affect them much in a much deeper way. So on a day-to-day basis, we may have no issue with the domestic help who comes to our house, and she may be actually coming from any state. She may be from Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, coming to Bangalore for whatever reasons and working in your house. On a day-to-day basis, absolutely indispensable. But there are issues that have a larger political conversation that then creep into this, you know, I would say coexistence that happens. And that is where we find that there are many challenges for migrant workers. But the other aspect is also that in these cities, the local residents who are here, particularly in the peripheries, are struggling with a lot of, jobs, education. There are multiple challenges, and people who are coming in from outside are willing to work for less, so that there's a wage disparity. There are a lot of these challenges, and then there is no way to resolve them. So, and that I think leads to a lot of friction, which can be avoided because technically everybody is contributing to the economy of that place where they have moved to. So I think that is what is resulting in a lot of othering, as you said, like who are these people, why are they here? But I think the question to pause and ask is, okay, so if they were not here, who would be doing these jobs? And I don't think the natural answer would be that the local residents would be doing the jobs. So I think that people are not mindful of, because a lot of the conversation is a bit of a rhetoric, which is where I think the problem lies.
And Anuradha, again, my next question also is to you. Like you were saying, that there could be people from outside, so-called outside, who might do the same work for less. So do you think these conflicts between the local and the migrants, who are seen as outsiders, is kind of, disguised as conflicts over language or being belonging or not belonging to that city or state, but actually at the heart of it, it is more economic, or maybe there's a congruence of that economic conflict as well as this of identities. Do you think that's happening?
I think partially yes. And I think one of the things with migration that we are seeing, and we are seeing it in many places, is that the demography of a place is changing. And this is both at the source and destination, right? So if you take a state like Kerala, you will see large pockets where you will not find so many local residents, as many as you are finding migrant workers, right? And this is true for many cities. In many cities, in many parts of the city, the population of migrants has grown over the years, right? And this is for multiple reasons: distress back home, aspiration to move to a bigger city, jobs are in bigger cities, in other towns, etc. Language then becomes the easiest way to sort of question someone, right? So, and having said that, I have to add, many migrants do make the effort to learn the language. because not because of the fear of this, but because it's functional, it's transactional. You go to a local market on Sunday. So if you see construction workers in cities, they are largely migrant workers, right? And they're building all these buildings and apartments which are coming up everywhere. And on Sundays, if you go to the nearest market close to the construction site, you will see that it's full of migrant workers. The food caters to them. The local person selling vegetables has learned some of their language, and they have learned some of. So on ground, it because it has to. But I think the challenge comes when we zoom out a little bit, and then we try to see, okay, there's a tendency of the destination state people who live there to sort of try and get a bigger bargain out of this. And I think I think language has become political in that sense, because if it was just an economic thing of people moving, working, language is by default needed, and people adjust and learn.
Yes. So there seems to be both a pull as well as a pull, rather push factor to internal migrants, to or rather to the movement. So I'd now like to ask Shivani. So Shivani, like I have come across states, like for instance, Bihar is the first state to have a policy on migrants. Um, uh, uh, for migrants who who are going away from Bihar as a source to other destinations. So what is your take on on the whole issue of
When it comes to policies or law, yes, we have a legal framework to basically protect their rights, whether through a Migration Act or whether through the labor laws which we have. But at the end of the day, when you look into migration, one thing which we need to understand is that why is there a problem? Because we are sharing the resources of the host country. So that is one issue which we have. And see, as citizen of India, the constitution gives each individual the right to freely move from one place to the other. Another thing, when you talk about policies, if we look into the migrants are mostly from in the unorganized sector. So in the unorganized sector, as ma'am has pointed out, like if not they who are ready to take up the jobs. But when we see that they are taking up those jobs, but another question which comes up is, are they aware about their rights? Whether they are ready to basically go and implement their rights, which is there in the books or which is there in the law. So, to implement effectively the law which we have is a big question, because somewhere they also have a threat that if they go and question something, they might lose their job for which they have migrated to another state. So that is another thing. What I believe is that this gap of the challenges can be reduced through assimilation. Assimilation is one of the ways where they adopt the culture or language or respect the culture of the state. So where there is a the gap is somewhere reduced. So because mostly, as pointed out, language becomes a problem, or there is an insecurity of over the host country or the host state population becomes a minority in their own state. So that fear will always be there. But somewhere assimilating with the local culture is something, or trying to adopt the culture, I think that will reduce the gap to a larger extent.
yeah, but also Shivani, I always feel that while the law does what has to be done, this especially when we talk about say assimilation or culture or bringing about social changes, that is and again another world in itself. It's like while the law is there, how does the change actually happen at the sociological or the cultural how realm?
Yeah, so law basically, as you said, that we have a law to protect them. We, on the broader perspective, even Constitution protects them. So, however, see, when we talk about like policies are also coming, like one ration, one nation. So something with respect to that, I think that will change to a certain extent. Not immediately, because migration also doesn't happen immediately. It takes a very long time for migration, and people are moving from one place to the other for various factors. However, we are more concerned about the conflict which arises, or the challenges which arises out of migration, and the challenges can be reduced, like not maybe not immediately, but like if we implement them, if we educate them, if we aware them, then probably it will reduce to a certain extent.
All right. So, Anuradha, since you've done so much of reporting on internal migrants, is there any particular, events of note, challenges of note that you would like to share with us?
So yeah, I would also just like to add on to her thing, where she was talking about assimilation. So we actually in India have many examples. So if you look at Kerala, for example, they had this whole process through which migrant children could go to government schools, and then they needed a bridge to do that, and it was a language, and they worked with it, and we've had many instances where migrant children have topped Kerala state board, school education. So I just wanted to flag that this assimilation it seems really difficult, but some of it is actually just a very practical implementation of things that already exist, right? So that is one. Um, in terms of migration, a couple of things that we are seeing over the one is, of course, that the impact of climate and distress in terms of failing agriculture, frequent flooding, or frequent extreme weather conditions. I'm not going to call it climate change, but frequent extreme weather, too many days of heat, too many days of sudden heavy rainfall. These have become triggers for people, and this has increased vulnerability. So if we go back a little bit, a lot of the migration was cyclical. It was largely often very seasonal. So, when you're not on the farm, you're migrating for additional income. There were certain pockets only that were migrating to certain other pockets. We are seeing that this is expanding. For example, while migration from Bihar, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh is talked about, there's massive migration from the northeastern states nowadays, right? And this is for multiple reasons. Some of it is for education, but it's largely for livelihood because there are conflicts, say in states like Manipur, which is pushing people to migrate. So there are a lot of newer nuances which have come into migration, which I think need to be factored in. I also feel that a lot of the labor laws are now allowing people to have sort of formalized the idea of the middleman, because it's become contractual largely. So you have a lot of labor contractors, and their role seems to have sort of become more defined. Earlier they were very working on the fringes, now they work, but they are unable to guarantee a good wage, they are unable to guarantee good housing for workers who move. We are seeing a lot of migration into renewable energy projects, where again, they are not able to sort of ensure that workers get their due. So I think these are patterns that are emerging. And the last thing that I think is not being focused on a lot often is the fact that a lot of women are migrating. And this is not only because they are marrying. So earlier, I think even in our records, it's largely said that women migrate after marriage. But I think there are a lot of young women who are migrating for under duress, some out of choice. But that is happening, and then again, that's a whole setup of, are workplaces prepared for it? Are they giving them their dues? I also feel that implementation of things like a minimum wage, all these boards that exist to ensure worker rights are a challenge.
Yeah, actually, all these are very significant issues that you have highlighted, Anuradha. And just as an aside, that village is in Binanipuram in northern Kerala that you were mentioning. There, they instructed students in Malayalam. They were all Hindi speaking, and they were taught Malayalam. And I think the school also received some award, and it was a government school. And like you said, there are these issues of when it comes to livelihood, there are issues like wage theft. And that is just one of the problems that they face. It could be something like how do they remit money back to their families? They're not literate. They may not be able to kind of learn or use technology the way the rest of a whole lot of others. All of us are using. So that brings me to Shivani. Do you think legal awareness helps also because this lack of power in a way, they're very vulnerable. They're also subject to a whole lot of other issues, like perhaps they could be picked up for not committing crime. Sometimes they are presented before a magistrate. Sometimes they may not have anyone to support them. So in that background, do you think legal awareness Is
Definitely legal awareness we require. In the sense, when they migrate and when they come to a new environment, they are ready to accept anything. So as Mama said, there are migration at a large scale from northeastern part. So one of the reason is that there are lack of opportunities there. So probably you can earn 100 rupees per day in northeast India, where however here you can earn triple of it. So they decide to leave everything and come and migrate to a place where they can fetch more money. So under that situation, if somebody says something, they are ready to do it and they're ready to believe it, and without any other thoughts, because they feel that they may be, say for construction, they have a contract. So when they contract, migrant workers, definitely minimum wages are not given, because they also want to take that opportunity that they will do at a lower price. So that is where we need to ensure, we need to create awareness amongst them that, you need to fight for your rights, and you need to have this minimum wages for everyone equally. So coming back to the question where there are possibilities of crimes against them, definitely, yes, yes, possibilities are there because, as I said, they're ready to accept anything. Even when they stay in a rented house, or they're ready to pay anything without thinking twice, so that they are not displaced. So that is something which is a concern. And also, when they come for migration, if we say some states are not well developed and they're not illiterate, so there are people who tell them that you will be migrated to a particular economically beneficial state where you can get an opportunity to work. However, in that, they are trafficked also. So there are possibilities for migrants facing certain challenges during this transition from one state to the other.
And just to add to that, it's very difficult to organize them. So there's also the collective is not really easily formed. Where, so if it's factory workers and they have collectivized, there's a collective bargaining,
yes.
which is quite challenging in terms of a migrant
Yeah,
community.
simply because they are unorganized, and more importantly, they don't have an identity. Perhaps they don't have even an Aadhaar card, which we, or any other proof of address, because they don't have homes. So how can they? I mean, how can there be a address proof, and or any other identity that could perhaps make them be able to use government schemes where they could benefit from. So you just mentioned women. Can you tell us something more about how are they, like you also said that it's not one of the reasons for migration is marriage, but then you also said that it is no longer that way. Oh, there are, there could be for other reasons that women are coming to or migrating to another state. So can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so I think so. If I'll give an example, so if you look at the Skill India program, like skilling centers, which largely are a lot of them are set up in states which we call source states, and it does encourage a lot of women to sort of teach them certain skills, and then they are moved to work largely right across. So if you look at the garment sector, for example, so they're being skilled in a different state, and then they're being moved to the south, for example. Now, on the face of it, it's all good, right? Like you're creating a job, you're giving it. But I think even there, the agency of the person who's migrating is quite limited. Now, again, there is no contract. Again, the wages are not guaranteed. Again, your work hours, your work situation, you have no control over. So this is one pocket where we are seeing there are a lot of women who move. There are a lot of also young people we are coming across increasingly who are moving because there is distress at home. So we are seeing adolescent girls dropping out of school at, say, in their 15, 16, that sort of age, and moving into jobs, even if it's for a couple of years. Now this is not very new, because earlier, if you see in Tamil Nadu and all, when they had this schemes where they would, you work till you earn enough to pay off your dowry kind of scheme, Sumangli, etc. It was technically a bit of this, right? You migrated from one part of the state to another. Now we are seeing also young girls, however, are migrating out of aspiration. So while these are challenges and there's duress, there's also an aspirational factor amongst youth, part of whom also are young girls. And I think the thing to do better to provide is also spurring them on to move. So it's a combination of things, but I think what really matters is that it is a right for them to move, so that part is fine. But when they get to cities, the navigation is really difficult, particularly if they've come by themselves or in a group without a, as a family. And I think that is where they face more challenges than the men of their age who migrate, in finding homes, in what kind of work can they go around freely, and also getting harassed more, in terms of sexual harassment and things like that.
But I think that's very heartening to think that women are venturing beyond their homes into other states for a livelihood. And of course, there could be these accompanying challenges, like maybe, not safety of person isn't there. Or perhaps maybe they have a slight advantage over the men. Obviously, like nowadays, I wouldn't say the world is safer for men, though it's a very generic, large generalization that I'm making. But then, as in, while it is a tough world for women, it is also kind of nice to know that they have their aspirations and they're willing to follow it, even if it means migrating to other states.
Yeah, but often we also see it's a little more short-lived. So I think maybe they come with aspiration, but then in reality, it's
They
quite,
struggle to cope
I
yeah.
with
see.
the challenge.
That is also a
So, do
fact.
they go back to the sources?
Not so easily. So I think one of the things that forces them to go back often could be health. See, accessing healthcare in cities is very difficult, and for women, especially some of them, if they're young mothers who have moved, in this case, say with their husband, healthcare is quite difficult to access, even for your child, for yourself. Plus, cities are expensive. So there was this interesting thing I was reading about construction workers, and a lot of women also are part of the construction work sector. Now, on a Sunday, while the men will go out on the weekend and they'll have their little cricket, they play some cricket sport, or and the women largely stay in those little, they don't come out because they don't feel it's easy to assimilate. So they then, if there are three or four or five of them, they stay back on the weekend. They really don't have any leisure in that sense. Then they just stay at home. So I think these small things are difficult for them. They would prefer to therefore go back. So I think how long they migrate is different from how men think about migration and the duration.
My mind this other term called seasonal migration. Do
Yes.
you think it's also related to that, or that is a different uh,
I think
term
seasonal
altogether?
migration is related to the farm cycle.
Yes,
So
maybe during harvesting.
yeah, and then it's also related to, so suppose you're going to a bricklane. Bricklane again works seasonally because
Okay.
during the rains, uh, they don't fire bricks. So normally, workers are also taken in for a 8 month duration, and then it closes down during monsoon. So there's no work. So seasonal, I think, in that sense, but this is not seasonal. They come with the intent, but I'm saying the duration of migration could be 2 years only, or it will vary.
So, Shivani, just wanted to have you rather explain to all of us. When we speak, a lot of people they mix up migrants, immigration, uh, even refugees. If you could kind of demystify
Yeah,
and
they're
make it more
actually
clear.
the terminologies carry different meanings, and it is very much important for all of us to understand the meaning of the terminologies which we use, and rather we be very very careful in using the terminologies, because some terminologies, such as when we say migrant, we basically refer to internal migration within a boundary, say in India, from one state to the other. However, when we say illegal migrant, illegal, the term itself is negative connotation, where we directly like allege that the person is not have failed to cope up with the law or have violated the law. So that is a terminology which is not very, should be not should be used often. Rather, when we say refugee, a person can migrate from one country to the other in the fear of persecution. So there, then we say that he's a refugee, and refugee laws depends upon the country and whether they want to accept and under which law they want to accept. If not, they are not part of Refugee Convention of 1951. So, and then again, we have documented migrants, undocumented migrants, and the list continues. But it's like this terminologies needs to be really clear with a person when we use a term for a person, whether he's a migrant or a refugee.
Thank you so much. And I think we'll conclude this very insightful chat. Thank you, Anuradha. Thank you, Shivani. Those were some very interesting notes on internal migrants. So this is Renuka signing off till we all meet up again on just another hot topic from CJMC DSU.